Down in the northeast of England, which is so far away from the Delta in Mississippi and all of that thing. And I'm listening there.
Paul Rodgers was one of rock music's most powerful voices and had very strong beliefs about what rock music should represent. The British blues rock singer who led the bands Free and Bad Company believed that real music came from the heart and soul, not from trying to make money. He watched with growing disappointment as many bands gave up their musical roots to chase commercial success. Rodgers became famous for songs like All Right Now and Can't Get Enough. He was known for his complete commitment to blues rock music and his open criticism of artists who he felt betrayed those musical traditions. For Rodgers, this wasn't just about different styles of music. It was about whether music should serve business interests or stay true to its artistic purpose. In a 1979 interview, Rodgers said something that became his main message. Rock and roll was born from real pain and real joy. When you strip that away and replace it with formula, you're not making music anymore. You're manufacturing a product. These words showed his fight against every band he saw selling out their artistic soul. Rodgers believed that music should challenge both the artist and the audience. He thought that real creative growth required taking risks rather than playing it safe. His conflicts with various bands weren't simple disagreements about musical style. They were moral battles to preserve rock's authentic spirit. Rodgers never forgot where rock music came from, and he expected other musicians to remember too. Journey. From explorers to manufacturers, Paul Rodgers was particularly disappointed with Journey's musical evolution. His frustration with the San Francisco rock band wasn't about their talent. He recognized they were skilled musicians. Instead, he was upset about watching them change from adventurous, experimental musicians into predictable arena rock performers who gave up artistic exploration for radio-friendly songs. Rodgers' disappointment with Journey grew throughout the late 1970s when the band was moving away from their experimental beginnings toward mainstream appeal. According to Walter Yetnikov, a former Columbia Records executive, Rodgers watched their transformation with increasing sadness. Rodgers reportedly told him, "Journey started as musical explorers and ended up as jukebox manufacturers. They traded their creative compass for a calculator and lost everything that made them special." What bothered Rodgers wasn't that Journey became commercially successful. It was that they gave up their artistic vision to get there. While Rodgers had kept his blues rock foundation strong throughout his career, moving from Free to Bad Company, Journey was achieving platinum sales through what Rodgers called demographic pandering, making songs designed by committees to avoid offending anyone while inspiring even fewer people. Rodgers told Rock Scene magazine in 1981 that music should challenge both the artist and the audience. He defended his belief that creative growth required taking risks rather than seeking safety. The distance between Rodgers' philosophy and Journey's approach became obvious when Journey's power ballads started dominating radio programming. At a 1982 industry conference, witnesses said Rodgers refused to participate in a panel about successful career changes. He later told organizers, "I won't celebrate the death of artistic courage just because it sells more records." For Rodgers, Journey represented musicians who had the talent to do something special, but chose to play it safe instead. Foreigner. Cultural betrayal. Rodgers had a particular resentment toward Foreigner, and it wasn't about their musical skills. His problem was watching Mick Jones, a fellow British musician, abandon the rich blues and rock traditions of their homeland to create slick American-style arena songs designed purely to succeed in overseas markets. The conflict between Rodgers and Foreigner intensified during the late 1970s, when Foreigner was dominating American radio with their polished sound. According to Jack Douglas, a former Atlantic Records producer, Rodgers viewed their success with visible unease. Rodgers reportedly told him, "Mick's taken everything authentic about British rock and sanitized it for American consumption. He's turned our musical heritage into an export commodity rather than keeping it as a living art form." What disturbed Rodgers wasn't that Foreigner was successful, but how they achieved that success. While Rodgers had carried British blues rock traditions forward through his various projects while keeping their emotional heart, Foreigner was achieving massive success through what Rodgers called cultural tourism, British musicians pretending to be American because it paid better than staying true to their roots. The divide between Rodgers and Foreigner became permanent when their approach influenced other British musicians to adopt similar American-friendly strategies. At a 1981 London music industry gathering, witnesses said Rodgers avoided foreigners' representatives entirely. He later explained to colleagues, "I won't shake hands with people who've sold their musical passport for a bigger bank account." For Rodgers, foreigner represented what he saw as homeland betrayal, while Mick Jones seemed focused on international success rather than cultural preservation. Rodgers believed that musicians had a responsibility to honor and maintain their musical heritage instead of abandoning it for commercial gain. Asia. Wasted potential. Rodgers felt particularly disappointed by Asia, the supergroup formed by talented musicians from Yes, King Crimson, and Emerson, Lake Palmer. His contempt for these progressive rock all-stars wasn't about their individual reputations. He respected their past work. Instead, he was upset about watching exceptionally talented musicians waste their collective genius on uninspired, corporate-friendly material that insulted their previous artistic achievements. Rodgers' disillusionment with Asia reportedly peaked in 1982 when their debut album achieved massive commercial success despite what many considered creative mediocrity. According to John Kalodner, a former Geffen Records executive, Rodgers analyzed their approach with growing disgust. Rodgers reportedly told him, "These are some of the most innovative musicians in rock history, and they're choosing to make elevator music. It's like watching Picasso decide to paint house numbers instead of masterpieces." What appalled Rodgers wasn't Asia's sales figures, but their artistic choices. While Rodgers had always pushed himself to grow creatively within his blues rock framework, Asia was achieving platinum status through what Rodgers called lowest common denominator rock, supergroup talent wasted on subgroup ambitions. The disappointment became personal for Rodgers when Asia's success encouraged other veteran musicians to form similar commercially minded supergroups. At a 1983 recording industry event, witnesses said Rodgers questioned whether musical experience was becoming a liability. He told attendees, "If wisdom leads to compromise, maybe we're better off staying naive and hungry." Asia seemed satisfied with their streamlined approach, rather than concerned with meeting progressive expectations. But for Rodgers, Asia represented squandered greatness. Musicians who had the ability to create something truly innovative, but chose to make safe, predictable music instead. REO Speedwagon. From rock to wedding music, Rodgers had particular scorn for REO Speedwagon, and his mockery wasn't about their Midwest origins. His problem was watching them transform from credible hard rock performers into soft rock specialists who represented everything Rodgers believed was destroying American rock's backbone and credibility. Rodgers' contempt for REO Speedwagon reportedly crystallized during the early 1980s when the Illinois band's ballad-heavy approach was dominating FM radio. According to Ron Alexenberg, a former Epic Records executive, Rodgers studied their transformation with visible scorn. Rodgers reportedly told him, "REO went from playing real rock music to making wedding reception soundtracks. They've turned American rock into background music for people who don't actually like rock." What disgusted Rodgers wasn't REO Speedwagon's heartland appeal, but their artistic timidity. While Rodgers had built his career on powerful, emotionally direct rock that demanded listener attention, REO Speedwagon was achieving mainstream acceptance through what Rodgers called neutered rock, music so inoffensive it might as well be instrumental wallpaper. Rodgers told Cream magazine in 1982, "Rock should grab you by the throat, not pat you on the head." He was defending his belief that authentic rock required emotional intensity rather than comfortable familiarity. The cultural gap between Rodgers and REO Speedwagon became unbridgeable when REO's approach began representing American rock to international audiences. At a 1983 overseas music festival, witnesses said Rodgers expressed embarrassment about sharing stages with such acts. He later told his band, "When foreigners think this represents American rock power, we've lost something essential about what made this music dangerous." For Rodgers, REO Speedwagon represented the softening of rock music into something safe and forgettable. Chicago, the ultimate artistic tragedy. Rodgers felt his most profound sense of artistic betrayal when it came to Chicago. His fury toward the horn-driven innovators wasn't about their jazz influences. He actually appreciated musical diversity. Instead, he was devastated by watching them completely abandon their groundbreaking, G-rock jazz fusion experiments to become adult contemporary ballad specialists who destroyed their own revolutionary legacy. The heartbreak reportedly reached its peak during the late 1970s, when Chicago was achieving renewed commercial success with syrupy love songs. According to James William Guercio, a former Columbia Records producer, Rodgers followed their career trajectory with growing anguish. Rodgers reportedly told him, "Chicago created something genuinely new in rock music, then threw it all away to become a Las Vegas lounge act. They had musical lightning in a bottle and chose to pour it down the drain." What devastated Rodgers wasn't Chicago's popularity, but their regression. While Rodgers had always sought to expand his musical boundaries within his established framework, Chicago was achieving chart dominance through what Rodgers called artistic suicide, the conscious decision to become less than what you once were. The philosophical wound became permanent when Chicago's ballad success influenced other innovative bands to simplify their approaches. At a 1980 jazz rock festival, witnesses said Rodgers refused to appear on the same bill as Chicago. He later explained to promoters, "I won't celebrate the death of musical ambition, even if it pays well." Chicago seemed satisfied with their commercial renaissance rather than mourning their experimental period. But for Rodgers, Chicago represented the ultimate artistic tragedy. Musicians who had created something genuinely innovative and important, then deliberately destroyed it for commercial gain. Fleetwood Mac, the most painful betrayal. At the top of Rodgers' list of musical disappointments was Fleetwood Mac, the British blues legends who reportedly earned his ultimate rage in what he considered the most painful betrayal of musical heritage in rock history. This wasn't just another case of commercial compromise. For Rodgers, this was cultural suicide. The devastation reportedly began in the mid-1970s when Fleetwood Mac completely abandoned their blues foundation for California pop success. According to Mo Austin, a former Warner Brothers executive, Rodgers watched their transformation with visible anguish. Rodgers reportedly told him, "Fleetwood Mac was one of Britain's greatest blues bands, and they've turned themselves into American pop stars. They've committed cultural suicide and called it evolution." What shattered Rodgers wasn't Fleetwood Mac's commercial triumph. Rumors became one of the best-selling albums of all time, but their heritage abandonment. While Rodgers had spent his entire career honoring and extending British blues traditions through modern applications, Fleetwood Mac was achieving unprecedented success through what Rodgers called complete cultural amnesia, the deliberate destruction of everything that made them musically important. The betrayal became complete when rumors dominated worldwide charts while erasing all traces of their blues origins. At a 1977 industry celebration, witnesses said Rodgers confronted Mick Fleetwood directly, allegedly saying, "You've taken Peter Green's legacy and turned it into elevator music. Some betrayals are unforgivable." Music journalist Nick Kent reported that Rodgers later told him, "Fleetwood Mac represents everything that's wrong with the music industry. Bands willing to erase their own history if it means bigger paychecks." For Rodgers, this wasn't just about musical style preferences. It was about respect for the musicians who came before and the traditions they established. Fleetwood Mac seemed defensive about their artistic evolution rather than apologetic about their blues abandonment. But for Rodgers, they represented the ultimate musical sin, deliberately destroying their authentic heritage to manufacture artificial commercial appeal that insult cheese. It everything their previous music had represented. The bigger picture, Paul Rodgers' criticisms of these bands reflected his deeper beliefs about music and authenticity. He wasn't simply an old musician complaining about change. He was defending what he saw as the soul of rock music. Rodgers believed that music should come from genuine emotion and experience, not from market research and demographic targeting. Throughout his career, Rodgers maintained his commitment to blues rock while still allowing his music to evolve. He showed that it was possible to grow artistically without abandoning your core principles. His move from free to bad company demonstrated how musicians could change and develop while staying true to their musical roots. Rodgers' conflicts with these bands weren't personal attacks on the individual musicians. Instead, they represented his frustration with an industry that seemed to value commercial success over artistic integrity. He watched as bands with genuine talent and innovative ideas chose to make safer, more predictable music because it would sell better. The pattern Rodgers identified was clear. Talented musicians would start with authentic, innovative music that came from their hearts and experiences. Then, as they achieved some success, they would begin to compromise their vision to appeal to broader audiences. Eventually, they would abandon their original musical identity entirely in favor of whatever sound was most commercially viable at the time. For Rodgers, this pattern represented more than just individual artistic choices. It was a threat to rock music itself. He believed that when musicians abandoned their authentic voices for commercial formulas, they were contributing to the death of rock as a meaningful art form. Legacy and lessons. Paul Rodgers' passionate defense of musical authenticity offers important lessons about artistic integrity. His career showed that it was possible to maintain your principles while still achieving commercial success. Free and Bad Company both had major hits while staying true to their blues rock foundation. Rodgers' criticisms of other bands, while sometimes harsh, came from a place of genuine concern for music as an art form. He wasn't opposed to musicians making money or achieving success. He was opposed to musicians sacrificing their artistic vision solely for commercial gain. The bands Rodgers criticized all went on to achieve significant commercial success. Journey, Foreigner, Asia, REO Speedwagon, Chicago, and Fleetwood Mac all sold millions of records and gained worldwide recognition. From a business perspective, their strategies worked perfectly. But Rodgers' point wasn't about commercial success. It was about artistic legacy. He questioned whether these bands would be remembered for creating something meaningful and lasting, or simply for selling a lot of records. He wondered if their commercial success came at the cost of their artistic souls. Today, decades later, Rodgers' criticisms seem both dated and timeless. The music industry has changed dramatically since the 1970s and 1980s, with new technologies and business models changing how music is created and consumed. Yet the fundamental tension between artistic integrity and commercial success remains as relevant as ever. Modern musicians still face the same basic choice that Rodgers saw these bands making, whether to prioritize their authentic artistic vision or to compromise that vision for broader commercial appeal. Rodgers' example suggests that it's possible to choose authenticity without sacrificing success, but it requires courage and commitment to your artistic principles. Paul Rodgers' legacy extends backstage on his powerful voice and memorable songs. He represents the idea that musicians have a responsibility to honor their artistic heritage while pushing music forward. His battles with other bands weren't just about musical preferences. They were about the soul of rock music itself, and whether it would remain an authentic art form or become just another commercial product.